Saint Germain is accused of being involved with Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, Knights Templar, and a whole lot more secret societies. However, there are some who say he wasn't a Freemason at all. Today, in Chapter 7, we're getting into Freemasonry, and we're also going to cover number 8, removed from history. So I've updated the list, got this down to a 10-part documentary. Let's get started with Chapter 7, Freemasonry. According to Cadet de Gassecourt, he was a traveling member for the Templars, going from lodge to lodge to establish communication between them. Saint Germain is said to have done this work for the Paris chapter of the Knights Templar. Investigation proves him to have been connected with the Asiatic Brethren, or the Knights of St. John the Evangelist from the East in Europe, and also with the Knights of Light, and with other various Rosicrucian bodies in Austria and Hungary. He founded, according to Eliphas Levi, the Order of St. Joachim, but this statement is not supported by any historical evidence at present, though many of his students and friends were members of this body. And I would probably trust the word of Eliphas Levi on Masonic topics. Everywhere in every order where real mystic teaching is to be found, we can trace the influence of this mysterious teacher. A summarized account from the Garten Loba fits here. The letters are said to be authentic, and from internal evidence there is little doubt about it, for the information has to do with the Masonic work on which the Comte de Saint Germain was engaged. He is in connection with many remarkable men and has an extraordinary influence upon others. My cousin Landgraf Karl of Hesse is much attached to him, and they work together in Freemasonry and other dark sciences. Lavater sends him chosen men. He can speak in different voices and from different distances. Can copy any hand he sees once perfectly. He is said to be in connection with spirits who obey him. He is a physician and geognost, and is reported to have the means to lengthen life. In the Masonic and Rosicrucian literature, one often finds hints as to the relations of Saint Germain to the secret societies of Austria. One of Saint Germain's adherents in Vienna was Count J.F. Kufstein, in whose lodge magical meetings were held, which generally lasted from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Saint Germain was present at one such meeting and expressed his satisfaction with the workings. In 1777, Saint Germain was in Leipzig, and using the name the Count Weldon, but his identity was soon pierced. The famous Saint Germain, who is often in several countries, presented himself as the Marquis de Belmar, or Monsieur Castellane in Leipzig, has been living here since October under the name of Weldon. Prince Frederic Augustus had been asking for information about Saint Germain and received a reply from another Masonic brother who he had sought a second opinion from, who says, "I avow myself too little enlightened to judge a man such as the Count of Saint Germain, but I will obey your order," and continues to say that Count Weldon's letter is what one would expect from a man knowing the Tau. Now, the Tau is a Masonic symbol standing for the key to spiritual knowledge. Turning to the Masonic Encyclopedia here under Tau, specifically Triple Tau, Ezekiel speaks of the Tau or Tau cross as the mark distinguishing those who are to be saved from those who are to be slain. And in the Royal Arch degree, it's a mark designating and separating those who know and worship the true name of God from those who are ignorant of that august mystery. So he's saying that Saint Germain is a man knowing the Tau. However, another letter came in from Christian Emmanuel Froelich, who had eaten a meal with Saint Germain, and said this Sir Weldon is not a Mason, not a Magus, not even a Theosophist. And later says that Saint Germain is still in Leipzig, but all hope fades of his having the least Masonic knowledge. And here's a letter to Prince Frederick from another Freemason, who says, "Having gained his confidence, I drew him into speaking of Masonry. Without displaying much zeal or even particular attention, he avowed to being of the 4th grade, though no longer able to remember the signs. He did not seem to know anything of the system of the strict observance, and I could therefore go no further with him." A letter of his says that he had promised a visit to Hanau to meet the Landgraf Karl at his brother's house in order to work out with him the system of strict observance, the regeneration of the order of Freemasons in the aristocratic mind, for which you also so earnestly interest yourself. Meanwhile, the Masonic correspondence continues. Count Weldon is certainly not one of ours. If he possesses real secrets, I possess greater. It seems to me shocking that something so precious as the secrets of Saint Germain should be offered to me by a profane, an atheist. And by using the profane, it's the literal sense of profanum. It's what Masons call people who are not Masons. Saint Germain gave no sign of being initiated into Freemasonry and must be classified as profane. And Bischofwerder is really struggling with this because he can't understand how such important discoveries and secrets can come to humanity from outside of Freemasonry instead of from within. A Danish Freemason had warned that Saint Germain was not one of theirs, not a Mason or not of the strict observance. And Prince Karl knew that Saint Germain was not a Mason, for he nowhere refers to him as Brother Saint Germain when writing to another Mason, such as Wildermaz. Anytime they're referring to another Mason, they call them brother, just like here, addressed to Brother Saltzman. So in all of these letters, not once is Saint Germain called Brother Saint Germain, which is a very strong indicator that he is not considered a Mason by them. Wildermaz would have known from that alone that Saint Germain was not a Mason, since in intermasonic correspondence, members of the order are nearly always referred to as brother. Prince Karl recognized Saint Germain as a deeply thoughtful man who they were glad to know, but at the lower level there was a tendency for Freemasons to be hostile towards him, probably because of the immense luster of his name and the regard in which he held in high places, which was unallied to Masonic titles, and this aroused jealousy. He had always acted as though he knew nothing of Freemasonry or high knowledge, though during the last year a number of things convinced me to the contrary. He said something strange, that he was the most ancient of Masons, and this would be of deep significance if authentic. Here's the source for that: The Origins of Freemasonry in France, page 316, English translation. I don't know if I told you about the last of the conversations I had with him. You know what he said? I am the oldest of the Masons, but he always pretended not to know anything about Masonry or high knowledge. However, the later year, many circumstances confirmed the opposite to me. C.W. Leadbeater, in The Masters and the Path, states that the head of the seventh ray is the Master, the Comte de Saint Germain, whom we sometimes call Master Rakoczy. 3 years later, in his book The Hidden Side of Freemasonry, he refers to him as the head of all true Freemasons. Now, Prince Karl was one of the best friends of Saint Germain, especially in the later years, and it's Prince Karl who says that Saint Germain was not a Freemason. However, he also assures us that Saint Germain was one of the greatest teachers who ever lived, yet tells us nothing of his teaching. Why not? As a Mason, he was accustomed to keeping things to himself. So the fact that Prince Karl says Saint Germain is one of the greatest teachers who ever lived indicates that he certainly was a Freemason, because a Mason would never call a profane one of the greatest teachers. And this book even touches on the theory that Saint Germain may have founded Freemasonry himself. If Saint Germain knew that in an earlier incarnation he had created and founded Freemasonry, that he was the first Mason and the founder of Masons. So it's not that Saint Germain in the 1700s created Freemasonry, but there's definitely the idea in esoteric circles that Saint Germain is the founder of Freemasonry when he was Francis Bacon and Shakespeare. The Russian dramatist Chekhov in his Queen of Spades refers to a book on occult sciences written by Saint Germain when in St. Petersburg early in the 18th century, when he organized secret societies which probably played an important role in bringing on the Russian Revolution, just as his Freemasonic societies paved the way for the French and American revolutions. And here is the Queen of Spades. You have heard about the Count of Saint Germain, of whom so many marvelous stories were told. You know that he passed for a sort of wandering Jew, and that he was said to possess the elixir of life and the philosopher's stone. He succeeded admirably in his outer work, but his inner work will never be known by the profane, as it deals with the occult and was manifested in the secret schools of that time, notably those of the Freemasons. A strong tradition exists that he was an extremely powerful and influential initiate who founded more than one sect and was connected with them all. Saint Germain himself told the Duke of Bouillon that more than 200 persons in Paris belonging to a society presided over by the Duke of Bouillon had desired his acquaintance because they believed him to be a master, and it was categorically affirmed that he was chosen as a representative of the Great Masonic Conference in Paris in 1785, a year after his death. The principles disseminated by the Comte de Saint Germain were undoubtedly Rosicrucian in origin and permeated with the doctrines of the Gnostics. The Comte was the moving spirit of Rosicrucianism during the 18th century, possibly the actual head of the order, and is suspected of being the great power behind the French Revolution. He is generally regarded as an important figure in the early activities of the Freemasons. Thus, as one Freemason wrote to another, the legend of Saint Germain's adeptship grew. It is said that he took part in Vienna and in the foundation of the Society of Asiatic Brothers and the Knights of the Light, and that he was also partly responsible for the group in France known as the Philetes. If Saint Germain was once Francis Bacon, who founded Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry in England under the name of the Society of the Rosicruce Freemasons, then we may suppose that he continued to develop the work of these societies when he assumed the name of Saint Germain, in fact, as their leader. That is exactly what he did, starting with the Rosicrucian manifestos, which he issued under the name of Valentine Andreas in Germany, while still in England under the name of Francis Bacon during the first quarter of the 17th century. That the Comte de Saint Germain was also a Rosicrucian, there is no doubt. Constantly in the Masonic and mystic literature of the last century, the evidence are found of his intimacy with the prominent Rosicrucians in Hungary and Austria. This mystic body originally sprang up in the Central European states. It has at various times and through different organizations spread the sacred science and knowledge with which some of its heads were entrusted. And who were these heads who were entrusted with the sacred knowledge? According to Blavatsky, she mentions a cipher Rosicrucian manuscript as being in his possession. It's in the Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, where speaking on the Garden of Eden as a locality, it says that in the Chaldean Book of Numbers, its location is designated in numerals, and in the cipher Rosicrucian manuscript left by the Count of Saint Germain, it is fully described. The fact that Saint Germain possessed this rare work shows the position held by him in the Rosicrucian order. Manly Hall says that Saint Germain was an important figure in the early history of Freemasonry, just as he was its founder when he was Francis Bacon, which is also claimed by Nicolai, and this is indicated in the book Shakespeare, Founder of Freemasonry by Bacon's biographer Dodd. In the History of the Rosicrucians by Whittemans, it says, known in his later incarnations as Sir Francis Bacon and as Count Saint Germain. So once again, in the History of the Rosicrucians, claiming that Saint Germain is the reincarnation or incarnation of Francis Bacon. That the Count of Saint Germain was the secret leader of Freemasonry during the 18th century, continuing the work he commenced as Francis Bacon when the founder of that order. That Saint Germain was an important figure in Freemasonry and probably the secret chief of the society is indicated by the fact that he raised Prince Charles Alexander to the grade of Knight of the Rose Cross. Saint Germain is said to have taught his philosophy at Masonic assemblies, and both by Freemasons and Rosicrucians, he was regarded as their common chief. As he was the leader of Freemasonry, so he was the moving spirit of Rosicrucianism during the 18th century, who strove to bring about unity among the different Rosicrucian organizations that sprang up in the 18th century. Your statement that Saint Germain's secret societies brought on the French Revolution merely confirms the one that I made about Saint Germain's work. He was persistent in the creation of Masonic lodges all over Europe. Saint Germain traveled much throughout Europe and even made 2 journeys to visit the Shah of Persia. A concrete part of his work appears to have been the founding of Masonic lodges in many cities, a work far more difficult than now, and in some countries only possible through the personal favor he enjoyed in royal cities. Isn't it interesting that in 1725, English Freemasons founded the first French lodge in the neighborhood of Saint Germain in Paris? We shall see here that Saint Germain was not only the leader of Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism in Europe during the 18th century, but he was the actual founder of these orders during the 16th when he was known as Francis Bacon. In modern Freemason literature, the effort is made to eliminate his name and even in some instances to assert that he had no real part in Masonic movement of the last century, and was regarded only as a charlatan by leading Masons. Careful research, however, into the Masonic archives proves this to be untrue. Indeed, the exact contrary can be shown, for the Count of Saint Germain was one of the selected representatives of the French Masons at their great convention at Paris in 1785. We find Deschamps speaking of Saint Germain as one of the Templars. An account is also given of the initiation of Cagliostro by the Comte de Saint Germain, and the ritual used on this occasion is said to have been that of the Knights Templar. There appears, curiously enough, to have been a conspiracy of silence amongst the diplomats and writers of this period and later, for it is constantly a recurring experience to find all references of Saint Germain carefully excluded, even in cases where the original sources contain much information about him. Now, previously I had planned a chapter for how Saint Germain was strategically removed from history, and I think we've covered that pretty good here. We can see how kings and queens and the writers of that period have removed any reference that they had or any historical paper they had that mentioned Saint Germain, or they've classified it. All correspondence is marked secret and can only be seen when sanctioned. So anything pertaining to Saint Germain has essentially been classified, and we as the public have not gotten access to it. Everything in this documentary are the bits and pieces that are left, but the real authentic historical papers, we'll never get to see them, and they're essentially classified and or held by secret societies. So it leads you to ask that if Saint Germain was not a Freemason, why in modern Freemason literature is there an effort made to eliminate his name and assert that he had no real part in the Masonic movement of the last century? If he didn't have anything to do with it and he wasn't a Mason, why do they need to try to take his name out and eliminate it? And the same goes with the diplomats and writers of that period. Why was all the information about Saint Germain classified and taken away if he was just a charlatan who wasn't a Mason and didn't play any significant role like it is claimed he did? So in regards to Saint Germain and Freemasonry, we have a very confusing situation. We have the extreme hot and the extreme colds here saying that he was the originator of Freemasonry. He created it as Francis Bacon and then incarnated or reincarnated into Saint Germain and continued his work. And then we have the other historical view that he was not a Mason at all, that he didn't know anything of the system of the strict observance or remember any of the signs. So I don't know which side of the story to believe here. It seems to me most probable that the Masons are trying to remove him from their history and trying to say that he's had nothing to do with them, when the contrary is likely the truth.